thing. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And I enjoyed seeing your conversation with Pepperdine. I didn't realize you were an alumni.
yeah, all those years ago, it feels like a 5 lifetimes ago. But
Oh,
and the young woman who interviewed me was really good. I really did.
she was, and so I'm stealing some of her questions, but anyway, she was so
Well,
good, and
yeah.
she was, and she really did it both from the book, your journey, but also talked about things that would be relevant. I could tell to students today, especially those interested in
Hmm.
writing.
Hmm. Yes, and I'm working with her on another project, so we have a little bit of history here. But I just loved her. The questions were clear and to the point, and I was so glad that to get to be the inaugural person
Oh,
for that
oh, nice,
series as well. So it
wonderful,
was
wonderful.
quite an honor all the way around.
Yeah. Have you been back to the campus in recent
Yeah,
years, or?
yes, I have actually. They've had me back several times actually. I was a visiting scholar for a summer for
Oh,
the
wow.
education school, and then
Hmm.
I did some talks in chapel.
Hmm.
And for some, I was there for the Martin Luther King uh, celebrations about let's see, 3 years ago because we had just opened the center and they invited me to come and speak. So I've
Hmm.
been back there several times, and the campus that I graduated from was the inner city campus on 79th in Vermont. I did not
Hmm.
go to the new campus, which is in Malibu. So
Hmm.
it was just like being in a completely different place. It wasn't my Pepperdine that I went to school at because here they are with the ocean in front of the campus and the mountains
Right.
behind the campus,
Right.
and the campus is sitting there, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
no, this isn't the Pepperdine I went to. But it's beautiful. It's really
Oh,
beautiful. You can
wonderful.
imagine, can't
Nice.
imagine what it'd be like to just be able to sit at the student center and look at the ocean. I mean, just have the
Oh,
ocean is just right there.
wow. Wow. Well, that had to be a big transition from Moro, Arkansas to Los Angeles.
Yeah, actually, I spoke to the faculty when I was the visiting scholar, and I talked about the distance that I had to travel from Arkansas, from Moro, Arkansas to Pepperdine, in
Wow.
terms of both, in terms of geographically, but in terms of psychologically and
Mhm.
spiritually, because there was so many deficits that I had to make up in order
Right.
for that trip to be what it turned out to be. And so it was pretty interesting to think about that, because that was a long journey actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved hearing about your reading about your car that on the way back,
Oh goodness,
that
yes.
miracle car. Oh,
Yes, that
oh,
old Valiant that had to have 10 quarts of oil put in it one day. So
mhm.
anyway, it was talk about grace. That's what that was all about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, some of our folks are having trouble getting in. Let me just tell them, say to Gates, trouble fixed, try again. Some of our regulars trying to get in. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, Zeta said, I can finally hear you. Yay, good. Zeta, you've joined us. Kendra, a few of our regular adult forum people have joined us, and hopefully a few more will come in. We're still about a couple of minutes away from 9 o'clock. We were just doing a pre-chat with Catherine Meeks, Dr. Catherine Meeks, our speaker,
Mhm.
and so we'll get started here in a couple of minutes. Just talking about she was recently an alumni lecturer over Zoom for Pepperdine University, her alma mater, and I got to hear that on Tuesday. And tell us about that series. You were the inaugural lecturer.
Yeah, the library has instituted the Pepperdine Authors Lecture Series, and they invited me to come as the inaugural person. And I was
Mhm.
just very honored to be the first person. And I think it's a wonderful thing they're doing, not only to just have somebody come and talk, but also to encourage, I think, the students in terms of activism and writing and just in general. So it
Mhm.
was delightful. It was a delightful hour, It's one of the
Wonderful.
most delightful hours I spent last week, actually.
Well, it was a delightful hour for me too, just to listen in
Well, thank you.
and just see the love that you have for your alma mater, an interesting history, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Um,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
Well, I'm
I
glad you
think
were
we're
there,
about.
Paul. You never know who's in the audience, you know. You
I know
just
on Zoom these
you're just
days, you never
there.
can tell.
Yeah, yeah, that's
That's right.
right.
But that's been one of the wonderful little blessings of the pandemic is I've done continuing education events and different things, and I'm sure you have. And I see that you
Hmm.
guys, your center has all sorts of Zoom offerings, webinars, and things going on
Hmm.
that I'm
Yeah,
sure you've expanded over the last year.
it has been amazing. We have our database, our reach, our audience, everything has grown, and we have doubled our database in the last 12 months.
Great, great,
because of
wonderful.
the ability to do virtual programming and having people able to sign on. So, and we will continue to do live streaming when we're back in the center because we don't want to lose that audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's 9 o'clock. We may have others join us as we move along. I'm Paul McLain, Associate Rector of Calvary Episcopal Church in Memphis. Welcome to our Sunday Adult Forum. Sorry we had a technical glitch as I was trying to get the system started a little early, but hope I see some of our folks are joining us, and hope more will. And we're delighted to have Dr. Catherine Meeks, the Executive Director of the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta, with us today. And I got the privilege of meeting Dr. Catherine Meeks last year or 2 years ago on a justice
Mhm.
pilgrimage, where she invited over 20 clergy people and others from each representative from each diocese in the southeastern United States for a week with the center. And we also, in addition to doing work in Atlanta, we went to Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina to tour some of the history there. And it was just a phenomenal experience. It was around this time of year, May of
Mhm.
2019. And we did a
That's right.
follow-up meeting in 2020. But Catherine, why don't we begin by just telling us about the vision for the center, how it came about,
Mm.
and how that mission has evolved.
Well, let me just say again, thank you, Paul, for inviting me to do this. I love these kinds of events where I get to talk about the work I love so much. Um, I was the chair of the Commission for Dismantling Racism in the Diocese of Atlanta for a good long time, and that commission outgrew itself because of the way we began to approach the work. It just mushroomed all over the place. And one day Bishop Wright said to me, you all have outgrown yourselves as a commission. And I said, well, yeah, I'm really glad you realized that because I know we've outgrown ourselves. We were a group of 15 volunteers doing this work, had people contacting us from around the country wanting to know what we were doing, and people coming to Atlanta to visit, and it was just, we were like a center, but we were just a little commission of volunteers, and it was becoming embarrassing actually to be that called upon and yet to not have any kind of real structure for what we were doing. So I said to Bishop Wright, let's ask Bishop Michael if he would be interested in collaborating with this diocese to start a center for racial healing that would be a resource for the church. And we inquired about that, and Bishop Michael was very open to it. And within, I guess, about 6 months after that conversation got started, we had developed the Center for Racial Healing.
Wow.
And for 3.5 years ago, we had the opening for the center here in Atlanta, across the street from the Atlanta University complex. And the center is a collaboration between the Diocese of Atlanta and the presiding bishop, and it is a resource for the church. It's supposed to be a resource for the whole Episcopal Church. So we are delighted that that's happening, that we're able to work with dioceses all across the country and also in Latin America a little bit. And my biggest vision for us is that we would put ourselves out of business,
Okay.
that we would do the work that needs to be done to mobilize the churches in the Episcopal Communion to do the work that needs to be done. So there would not be a necessity to have a body like us doing anything, because every parish would be doing their own work around racial healing and around justice and equity and all those things. That's my biggest vision. Now, my more practical vision is to do everything I can for to help be the right kind of catalyst to help that mobilizing process in our parishes.
Wonderful. And it was interesting hearing Bishop Rob Wright talk as sort of a keynote address during our pilgrimage about how changing the name of that commission you were part of from dismantling racism to more positive, or becoming a beloved community. And tell us about that, how just that phrasing he taught really kind of reshaped your work.
Well, when I took over the commission, it was called the Anti-Racism Commission. And anti is negative. And if you say, Anti-Defamation League, the anti this or the anti that, it means you're against something. It's always better to tell people what you're for, I think, than what you're against. And so when Bishop Wright was elected and he came to the first meeting, his first kind of encouragement was, why don't you all rethink your name? And people have been very resistant to that idea. I wasn't so much so, but other folks on the commission. And so we came up with the name Beloved Community, Commission for Dismantling Racism, because in those two statements, we said what we wanted to do and then what we needed to do. So we want beloved community. And in order to get beloved community, we have to dismantle racism. And so our name became kind of a mission statement in a way, a little version anyway of our mission statement. And then we also reimagined the dismantling racism training to be rooted in the Eucharist rather than just being diversity training. I mean, there's nothing wrong with diversity training if you're Coca-Cola. There's something very much wrong with it if you're the Episcopal Church, because our only hope is our grounding in our faith. And if we are going to talk about the wounds in our culture and leave out the faith perspective, then what do we think we're even doing? And so here we were with doing training that you could do anywhere. I mean, it was like people said a prayer at the beginning and a prayer at the end, and for the rest of the day, you would never have known we were Christians. So I reimagined that and said, we are grounding this training day in the Eucharist. So we celebrate the Eucharist as a part of the day and use it as the umbrella under which we operate. Changing our name and reimagining that training was so transformative. And those are the two things that led us, I think, so fast toward becoming a center. In addition to beginning to say the work is about more than just training, that you've got to do other things. We started doing pilgrimages and book studies and all kinds of conversations on race and things to enlarge the conversation as well. And we were doing all that as a commission. And that's what got us to the point that we were just like, people were wondering, well, what's going on in Atlanta? And it's this little group of volunteers down there doing all these things, so, I think that I always want to encourage people not to talk about what they're against, not to be anti-racist. I'm very disturbed about the anti-racist language that people use so much in the church, because I think we are Christians and we need to be saying, what are we for? We're for trying to build something here. We're for healing. So how can we characterize that? How can we talk about that so that it's always an affirmation every time we open our mouths about it, rather than kind of, here you are affirming something negative when you really want to be doing something positive. So anyway, that's way too many words for your question, but
it's great. But I love the phrase, and obviously Presiding Bishop Michael Curry uses it a lot, becoming a beloved community.
Yeah.
And we refer often, we preachers talk about us all being beloved children of God. And of course, First John, we're doing a lot of readings in that right now, refer to us that way, beloved little children of God, a lot.
Mhm.
And I think that idea of becoming a beloved community is I love what you said too about how the center and your work is grounded in faith. And in
Right.
your life story, I noticed that too. And how
Right.
there's a strong connection, not with just the outer work of racial healing, but the inner work that
Right.
comes from a theological center. Um,
Absolutely. But I want to back up a second and say
sure.
something about beloved community.
Mhm.
You know, we say that we use all those words, and
Mhm.
I'm a great proponent of let's make sure the words we're using are words that we really mean to do something
Mhm.
with, and that we're
Mhm.
not just saying it because everybody's saying it or it sounds
Mhm.
good. Because always want to interrogate people with, well,
Yeah.
what do you mean when you're saying beloved community? And then you say we're beloved children of God, but do you believe that for every single solitary soul on the planet, or is
Mhm.
there, or do you have some
Mhm.
categories in mind? So we need to, I think we have to be kind of always in this state of being really examining ourselves that what am I saying when I say that? And when I say everybody is a beloved child of God, then what does my behavior say when I encounter somebody that is somebody that's giving me trouble? Am I including that person? And I think that's where the rub is. You know, we say that everybody is a beloved child of God, but then there's some children we think that are more beloved than others, and that's what gets us into trouble. And
Mhm.
so I just want to put my little 2 cents worth of words in that, because I'm on a little bit of a horse about let's be sure when we talk that we're talking about what we really mean and what we want to do something about. When we talk about beloved community, do we really want it? And do we want it enough to make the sacrifices that are required to get there? I'm very hesitant to use some words. Like I catch
Sure.
myself being very careful about, you know, how we just offhandedly tell people, well, I'll pray for you. And then we
Mhm.
forget. So we need to
Yes.
not do that. We need to say
Right.
to people, we need to say something else. I'll keep you in my thoughts. So I wish you the best. But if you
Mhm.
know you're not going to really pray for people, or if you have a tendency to forget to pray for people after you've told them, quit saying it.
Mhm.
You
Exactly.
know, because I don't know, I don't know if there's a scripture that says this, but it ought to be one that says that whatever your words are should really be grounded somewhere in you. You
Absolutely.
know,
I think let your yes be yes and your no be no, but there are probably a
yeah,
lot of others that really
yeah,
get into that. But one of the things you really probed uh, your the book that you co-authored 2 years ago, "Passionate for Justice," Ida B. Wells, "A Prophet for Our Time." And for those of you who don't know Ida B. Wells, she has a deep connection with Memphis. She was a Memphis journalist who covered lynchings here. She was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, or reared there, not too far from us, and a lot of our parishioners come from that. I'll hold up the book here
yeah,
so you can see it. And you co-wrote this 2 years ago with Nibs Stroop,
yeah,
a white pastor that
yeah,
you developed a friendship with. And tell us, Heidi, we were just talking about being an authentic person where your inner and
yeah.
your outer are one and your words matter. What you say
Right,
you're going to do.
right, right.
Ida
Yes.
Wells was that kind of person. And but tell us about your journey with why Ida Wells and tell us about
Mm.
her journey and your journey.
Well, thank you. And before, when I went off on the whole little thing about beloved community, you had said something about this connection between the inner and outer world in terms of trying to do healing. And I'm really clear now that if you don't do the inner work of healing and integrating the disparate parts of yourself, that there is never going to be any sustainable outer work that you will do, because you will not be able to create that in the
Mhm.
external world if you don't work on it in the internal world. So I'm so
Mhm.
totally convinced of that. So all of my work and time is spent on how to communicate that to people so they really can get it and understand that it's not that complicated. It's just a matter of turning your intention in that direction. And Ida B. Wells was, I taught her when I was a full-time professor. And one day my students said to me, you know, Dr. Meeks, you remind us of Ida B. Wells. And it just blew me out of the water because I wasn't thinking about that at all. I mean, I loved Ida B. Wells. I loved her energy and everything I learned about her. The thing that stood out the most to me was that the fact that her parents died in the yellow fever epidemic within 24 hours of each other. And people were talking about separating the children. There were 5 children, and they were going to parcel them out to friends because nobody wanted to take on 5 kids. And she said, if my parents heard this conversation, they'd turn over in their grave and no, you're not separating us. And we're going to stay together, and I'm going to be in charge of them. And folks ended up listening to her. And she was 16 years old.
Wow.
You know, what 16-year-old can even take care of themselves, let alone 4 other people? And some of you may have seen pictures of her with her hair piled up on her head. She piled her hair up on her head to make herself look a little older, and went out and got herself a teaching job so she could take care of her siblings, and got one of her relatives to help, who took the kids on during the week, and then she came home on the weekends and helped to do all the stuff to take care of them. She was a person who really believed that everybody is a beloved child of God and everybody should be free, and that one should step up to the plate. And she stepped up to the plate all of her life. And that is the authenticity that she brought to the table as a person, not a person without struggles, not a person without demons. I love to tell folks very quickly, read her Memphis diary, because then you get to hear her talking about the boys who didn't like her, or how she spent too much money on this dress or that dress, so now she's not sure she could pay the rent. So here's this human being, just like all of us, with foibles of different kinds. And yet here's this warrior woman who was fierce in her work toward of freedom and justice and liberation for Black people, for women, and for anybody that wasn't being treated right. And my soul just was dancing up and down to find this woman. So, and to have my students, she was a journalist too, and I write and was writing for the newspaper at the time when they said that to me. But to have my students make that comparison made me have to sit down and think about why were they doing that? Because it didn't just come out of the blue. They've been thinking about it. And I am like her some. I mean, I'm fierce in my commitment to what I'm doing. That's for sure.
Right.
And pretty courageous, I would go that far to say. And then she did all this work around lynching, trying to bring lynching up to have people understand. Lynching was not about Black men being the worst people on the planet. Lynching was about white supremacists using it to terrorize Black people and keep them in their place. And Ida B. Wells did a very good job of making that clear, to the point that her newspaper office, which was in Memphis, was burned down, and they put a bounty on her head. So if she had come back there, she would have been arrested and killed, I guess. And so she stayed for years in Chicago and away from the South because of that. So I would encourage everybody who's listening to not only to read mine and Nibs's book, but to just go look her up, since she's part of your culture. Absolutely. You know, she was there, and Holly Springs isn't that far from everybody there, I don't think. So, so I kept saying I was going to write about her. I want to write about Ida B. Wells. I want to write about her, but I didn't ever do it. And then I met Nibs Stroop, and Nibs and I didn't know it, but we grew up within 30 miles of each other in Arkansas. He grew up in Helena, Arkansas, and I grew up in Monroe, Arkansas. And we didn't know that until we met in Atlanta. And he was a retired Presbyterian preacher by the time I met him at the Open Door community here, where we were doing volunteer work together. And he started talking about Ida B. Wells. And I was kind of like Sojourner Truth when she stood outside of a church and heard white folks talking about Jesus, she wondered how they found out about Jesus with some of their behavior. You know, she couldn't figure that out. And I was thinking, what is this white man saying all this stuff about Ida B. Wells? I mean, who is he? And so we got to talking about her, and I discovered him as an authentic person struggling to be open to the fact that God's children are all beloved, and our job is to learn how to love them. And he had worked his lifetime trying to do that. And we just had the best conversations. And so I said, he said, I really want to write about her. And I said, well, I do too. And then we talked for 2 years. We had those conversations for 2 years because I was really busy doing the work out at the center and all that. And so I just said, one of these days. And then one day Nibs and I met, and I said, you know what? If we don't write this book, we're never going to do it. Because we're never going to have time. There's never going to be time. And so we just said, yeah, we're going to do it. And I think a couple of things, we set the book up so that it's a good study book. I mean, it's got questions at the end of each chapter so people can read it and engage in dialogue, because we wrote the book hoping that it would create conversation for people, a conversation piece for people, because we're always trying to enlarge this conversation about racial healing. We have got to keep talking. We have to do more than talk, but we've got to talk. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we did, which is kind of novel, is we engaged each other in some of the things that we disagreed about. Mm-hmm. Because almost every conversation that I have with white people, there's always this, it's so hard to know. I'm so scared I'm gonna hurt somebody's feelings or say the wrong thing, or it's so hard to start a conversation. And I just want to say, get over it. It's not that hard. You just do it. And you just do it particularly with people that you have some respect for and who respect you, because they're not going to throw you away just because you make a mess, you know? Mm-hmm. So Nibs and I wanted to model that because we disagreed about some stuff. You know, he talks about Thomas Jefferson, like Thomas Jefferson's one of his family members. I have no use for Thomas Jefferson. and we had that conversation, and we tease each other about it now. And so Nibs says, well, I'm seeing a little bit more. And I said, well, I'm not ever going to see him the way you do, you know? So, but we care about each other. We respect each other, and we are able to have this disagreement, you know, and be okay at the end of the conversation. We're not afraid that we're going to quit caring about each other just because we don't agree on everything. And that's an important thing to be modeled in the conversation on race, because Black and brown and white people have got to learn how to talk to each other honestly, without being afraid that everybody's going to go up in smoke. Nobody's going to disintegrate just because you said the wrong thing, or somebody got mad at you. I mean, somebody might get mad at you, but you're not going to die if somebody gets mad at you. They'll get over it, and you will too. And so in the church, that's what we're committed to, isn't it? That we can be in the mess of trying to live and not throw each other away.
Exactly.
And that's what we hope this book will help people to see.
Right. And you two, I love that the book, you get really the life story of Ida Wells, but you also get this conversation between Catherine and Nibs that's fascinating. And you mentioned Thomas Jefferson. Another word, and we were talking about words should have meaning and sometimes have different meanings. The word victory had a very different meaning to Nibs than it did to you. Tell us about that difference. Y'all had some conversations about that.
Yeah, he was being the good white man, plotting success on a graph and all that. You know, he said he had written this comment in the book about Ida B. Wells didn't have many victories. And I thought, what are you talking about? When I was reading, because we read each other's chapters. And so when we got together the next time, I said, Nibs, what do you mean she didn't have victories? The mere fact that she stayed alive until she was in her 80s is a victory, given the life she had to live. And just think about all the times along the way when she could have been completely done in and she wasn't. Those are victories. But he was thinking about that she didn't get legislation passed, or she didn't stop lynching, or she didn't get the vote or something, these big things that you got to plot on a graph somewhere. He really wasn't seeing victory in terms of getting up every day and continuing the journey. I mean, that's a victory. For oppressed people to get out of the bed in the morning is a victory. To get out of the bed and keep putting one foot in front of the other and go forward. And so we had a good conversation about that. And he really, it was like a light bulb went off for Nibs about that, So, and I have to say, to go back to the Thomas Jefferson thing, he has made me be less rigid in my disgust for Thomas Jefferson. So I have moved a little bit. So I don't want to make this a one-sided thing here. But it's easy. It's easy to be in those spaces, and if nobody holds up a mirror and say, "Really, think about this," then you don't have to think about it, and it's not like the world's going to come to an end if you don't think about it, but it can open up some new possibilities if you do think about it. So, and Nibs and I are just great buddies, and we love talking about this book. We before the pandemic, we were doing a few book talks together, and we've done a few on Zoom, but we'll probably do some more later, because we do have this deep faith and deep commitment to healing, and a deep commitment to being honest human beings. And those are the things we need to bring to the table. If we bring those things to the table, we can figure out the rest of the stuff. And actually, Paul, those things will transcend some of the rest of the stuff. You don't sit every day and just think about, oh, I'm talking to a white person, I'm talking to a brown person, I'm talking to a Black person. You don't do that when you get into this in the ways that I'm talking about it. It becomes more important that I'm talking about what's going on in my heart. I'm talking about how I feel. I'm talking about what I see. I'm talking about what wounds me. I'm talking about what makes me happy. That conversation will transcend that I'm talking to a white person or a Black person. It doesn't mean that Black and white's not still important. I do not want to sound like I'm saying that, you can be colorblind. There's no such thing as colorblindness. I mean, that is a myth that needs to be gotten rid of. You look at me, I'm a Black woman. You're not going to forget that fact. And I'm not going to forget that you're a white man. But if we're committed to having an honest conversation, we're not going to let that stop us. And we're not going to stay camped out at that point. It's a fact. Just like I breathe and you breathe, that's a fact. And then we go on. We don't sit trying to understand oxygen. We know that oxygen is there. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of wake up to, let's get beyond some of this stuff that keeps hanging us up, and decide that it's more important to be in a good, authentic relationship with people who don't look like you, don't talk like you, don't think like you, than it is to stay camped out around the difference.
Yeah. And I found it fascinating when I first came to your center. You shared right off the bat that the name of the center is the Center for Racial Healing, not the Center for Racial Reconciliation, as a lot of other centers and places call themselves, or even in our work we call it that. And because your claim that really spoke to me was there was not a real relationship to begin with when you're treated, when one aspect of it is treated as property.
That's right.
Yeah. But
there is no way that I don't think that racial reconciliation is a term that should ever be used, but for that very reason, because a slave master did not have a relationship with a slave that is transactional. They were dealt with as property. And so if you want to talk about healing being a possibility to lead to reconciliation, I can be in that conversation. But if you just want to jump to reconciliation and skip over the healing, I'm not in that conversation.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions I have too is just your thoughts on how a community of faith like Calvary can really do this work. And you, in your book with Nibs, you critique one-shot efforts like a Martin Luther King breakfast, or a one-time book study, or a one-time this or one-time that. But
Mhm.
that word relationship obviously is powerful in whatever we build. But what are some advice or counsel you could give us as we
Yeah.
begin, or this journey's been a part of us, but how we really make it
Right.
impactful?
I think that the most important thing for white people to do these days is to really ask some questions about what am I as an individual willing to do to participate in the racial healing journey in this country or in this church in your case.
Hmm.
What am I willing to do? What am I willing to give up? What am I willing to engage? And to really think about that hard, because we always want to start with some project out there somewhere that we want to go feed somebody that's hungry or go read to little kids. All those are good things, but they don't get to the right question. So what am I willing to do is deep down inside myself, am I willing to interrogate the way I've looked at the world and see if that really adds up with everything else, and turn my intention then toward what does it take to get me where I think I need to go. So if you live in a kind of a homogeneous bubble where you don't have a whole lot of people of color or different kinds of people in your environment, it would be important to ask, why is that? What is that
Hmm.
about?
Hmm.
How did that come to be? What do you need to do that's different to make that different, if making that different matters? And so I just feel like that as a church, you could engage in some of those kinds of questioning conversations together. That people can. I think that having some sessions, even in a parish, where people are asking, what is it that I need to do to make a difference here in this whole conversation about race in this country and in terms of racial healing, and
Hmm.
then really listen for the answer, not an answer particularly out of your head, but listen for an answer out of your heart,
Hmm.
and pay attention. I think it's really important to do what your heart helps you to discover, because we get into what too many shoulds. I should do this. I should do, yeah, there's some things we probably should do, but we need to be careful about how we come to those conclusions. Because I'm really for, let's do what you've got real energy for, where
Hmm.
your energy, you need to be trying to do whatever you do about racial healing, you need to be so compelled to do it until
Hmm.
nothing can stop you.
Hmm.
I am compelled to do what I do. There is no way that I will ever not be doing this work, because this is what I was sent here for, to do this work.
Hmm.
So what compels you? What compels you? What compels your parish to do whatever the parish decides to do?
Hmm.
A lot of the work needs to be inside the parish, inside the building, and with the folks who get, well, right now we're not in buildings, I don't guess, but
Hmm.
inside the gathering. And then what will be the outer work? So then if you go protest, if you go stand up for Black Lives Matter, if you go to the county commission meeting and argue for an ordinance that's going to make life better for homeless people or somebody, you are taking this person there who has a commitment that is grounded somewhere, rather than you just going because it's the thing you ought to do.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? I mean, that
It does.
the energetic difference here is
Right.
between walking this road toward racial healing from a internally grounded place versus doing it because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It is absolutely the right thing to do, but it's only the right thing to do if you're for you, if that's what your energy has pushed you toward, because your energy might be telling you to go sit in a nursing home and read to an old person
Hmm.
day after day, not to go to the city council meeting. Your energy could be sending you someplace else, and we need to make space for people to have different responses too, because we're bad about everybody's got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And everybody doesn't
Definitely.
have to do the same thing. Everybody has to be obedient.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to make more room in our communities for people's obedience, not to all be on the same track, but always moving toward the same goals of healing and restoring us to God. But not everybody has to do the same thing. Everybody has to do something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. We're about I think we've got about 11 minutes left, and I want to invite
Oh,
the folks who are listening. Oh, we're in good shape, but we want to invite folks for questions. And Zeta was saying, give examples of what the action, the question, And I was thinking when I at the Justice Pilgrimage, how Kim Jackson, who priest who's now been elected to the state senate in
yeah,
Georgia, and it was just phenomenal to hear her talk about her dream of doing that and how now that she's been elected,
yeah.
and she's a phenomenal young woman and priest, and she talked to me about how white people can do a lot of this work on her own to begin
Yeah.
with, she and your center recommend Betty Jo's asking about books too. One of
Hmm.
the books you recommended was Waking Up White by a white woman who just talks about her own journey of
Right.
discovering she thought of herself as a progressive white woman, but discovering how there were a lot of little racist things going on in her life or in the
Hmm.
organization she was a part of that she really wasn't noticing
Hmm.
until she
Hmm.
really and it really spoke to I mean maybe spoke to my journey of things that I'm missing, that
Right.
I'm
I
not
think,
seeing.
I've heard too many times from predominantly white audiences, how can we can't do this work well because we don't have any people of color in our group, or we don't have them in our community or whatever. And that's not irrelevant. That's not relevant. What is relevant is, do you want to be well? Do you want to
Mhm,
be healed? That's the major question. Do you want to be well in a society that's constructed upon a racist, of white supremacist paradigm? Do you want to be complicit with that paradigm, or do you want to be a resistor to that paradigm? And if the answer is I want to be a resistor, but I don't really know even what that means, then you read, you watch films, you talk, you pay attention, you get awake. And when
mhm,
you wake up, then you do something. And then I would say to the parish, when Paul stands up to preach sermons about this, that instead of trying to find a box to put it in so you don't have to deal with it, you say amen to the sermons, because that's part of what needs to be happening in our parishes. There's too much, oh, that's political, or that's this or that. So that's just another way to keep from listening. I mean,
yeah.
there's nothing political. Jesus Christ is at the core of this stuff we're talking about. And if we read the New Testament, we understand that. So I want to caution parishioners to be awake enough that when you hear the challenge, you hear it as a challenge to do something and not as a challenge to try to tell the priest what to say. Because
Mhm,
we get into this, how many times have I heard my priest friends say they have to be careful? They got to walk this tightrope because folks will get offended. Well, that's the first step that white people can do, is quit being offended when you hear the truth.
mhm,
The truth will make you free, but it can make you mad before you get free.
mhm,
And but when you feel yourself having a visceral reaction to something, it's a good idea to follow that rather
yeah.
than trying to push it off somewhere or to blame somebody. It's like medicine you take that you don't like.
Mhm,
Well, you don't quit taking it because you got this illness that needs to be worked on. So you work on it. So someone was asking about an example of the kinds of questions to ask. The first question that I would ask white people to ask is, when you start feeling uncomfortable about stuff around race, ask yourself, why am I uncomfortable? And follow that thread inside yourself and through your history and in every kind of way until you come to an answer that helps you understand yourself better. Because the temptation is to jump off the train.
mhm,
This is a bad ride. Let me get out of here. Let me tell the priest to straighten up. Let me say no to this, rather than let me follow this. I believe we should look for truth under every rock.
Mhm.
And some rocks will disturb us and some won't. But we need to be always on I'm trying to be a real, authentic, grounded human being that is doing the work God put me on the earth to do. That to me is the bottom line. That is the
Absolutely.
bottom line. The bottom line, the absolute bottom line is that God did not make a mistake giving us life. And God did not make a mistake sending us to the earth. But we got sent here with a mission to do something. We didn't just come here to take up space. And so we have to
Absolutely.
all figure that out. And race is one of the places where we get to work on becoming who we were put here to be. There are plenty other things that we got to do here as human beings to learn how to be human, really. And so I just feel like I just want to encourage my white sisters and brothers to stay in the story, to quit running, to quit, and to the one last thing. I don't know how much time we've got left, but I want to say this: don't disparage yourself for being white. You're here white. God sent you white, sent me black. I don't know why, but let me tell you something. I don't care how much we dislike it. We're gonna die this way. We're gonna be white till we die and black till we die. So if you're a white person, do something with that. Use that as a tool in the places in this culture where it is a tool. And so I've heard so many white people say, I'm ashamed to be white. Don't be ashamed. Think about, well, what can I do with this white skin that somebody with black skin can't do? And is God calling me to do anything about that? Just accept it is, I guess, what I want to say. I have had to come to grips with this. I'm a black woman. I'm always going to be a black woman. And so there's sometimes when there are many things I can do to help people because I'm an empowered black woman. Now I don't need to sit around and lament being black or powerful. And if you're white, you don't need to lament being white and having privilege. Use the privilege for somebody else, to help somebody else's life. And be grateful for it, and be a resistor to the system that gave you the privilege, because it won't give other people privilege. You can say, no, it's a bad system, but because I know how it works, I'm using this to help this person over here who absolutely couldn't have access. And then you can, because it's a distraction to just sit around lamenting about how bad you feel. We don't need that. We need people to be on the job, resisting and doing the best you can every day, and then being grateful at the end of the day that God gave you the life and the opportunity to do that. So,
yeah, and Zeta, her comment, am and have been jumping on the train, but identifying the action would be helpful for me. I think one of the, and by the way, Jamar Tisby, who was our Lenten preaching series speaker, just wrote a book, How to Fight Racism, with a lot of practical action-oriented things like how to make black friends, how to live a more integrated life. He gets into that, which is wonderful. But I think too, what Catherine is pointing out, a lot of interior work that we need to do. This book, Waking Up White, and there's several other books written by white people who are kind of coming to terms. In Catherine's book, Catherine and Nib's book, Nibs really gets into his own demons, his journey as a white man. It's really powerful. And I think that interior work is really important in this journey. But Catherine, before we go, I wanted you to maybe just share a little bit about some mentors in your life. And there's one interesting mentor that I think some of our I'm a pastoral care priest, can relate to. Arthritis, you said, has been a mentor to you.
Arthritis. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I say that rheumatoid arthritis has been my greatest teacher. But I want to say just in one sentence, I'm not really in the business of telling people what to do. I'm in the business of telling people how to find out what to do, because God knows what you were put on the earth to do, and it's your job to find out from God what that is. Because what I think you might need to do may have nothing to do with what God's got in mind for you. So I'm really hesitant. I mean, you can make lists and I can say 10 things and all 10 of them can be wrong for you.
Mhm.
So I resist that. I believe that when you do this kind of work I'm talking about, it will become clear what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And I have had arthritis for over 40 years now. And I'm supposed to be in a wheelchair. That's what the prediction was. But I decided that a wheelchair wasn't going to be a part of my story. And so I've reorganized my life completely since the onset of arthritis. I have engaged with arthritis as a teacher rather than an enemy. I wish I didn't have it. Let me be clear. It's aggravating, it's limiting, and it's painful. I mean, it's not like I have some pain practically every day, but I have come to see the world in a different way through this lens. And it's
Mhm.
made me more accepting. It's made me more patient with myself. It's made me more grateful for what I can do. And to let go of what I can't do and not, you know, lament about it. I mean, I wish that I could do some things. I can't do them. Let me see what else can I do. And so
Mhm.
I think that it's important to have gratitude, and arthritis has helped me to really embrace gratitude in some ways that I didn't used to know how to do. So, and then of
Yeah.
course I've had other great mentors, like my children. You know, kids all teach you a lot if you pay attention to them. And
Mhm.
then Howard Thurman, and of course Ida B. Wells, and my mother, who didn't say a lot about a lot of stuff, but the way she lived taught me a whole lot. And as I get older, I see myself living out some of that wisdom much more than I used to. But the most important thing we all can do is to be grounded and to be clear about who we are. And if that means that you need a spiritual director, a therapist, a, a soul friend, or whatever help you need to uncover who lives in your inner community is worth doing, because it will make all the difference in terms of how you live in the world and what you do in the world, and whether you have peace and a sense of living the life that God sent you here for.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. That's a good note to close on. And
Well,
so it's been a quick 45 minutes, but we've enjoyed our time together with you, and it's great to reunite with you. And I wanted to let
yes,
folks know that Holy Trinity Episcopal Church here in Memphis, a mutual friend, Tom Momberg, a priest, and his senior warden, Gene Chapman, are going to be offering a book study of Passionate for Justice, Catherine's book that we've been talking about with Nib Stroop, beginning May 16th over four Sundays at 4 p.m. If you'd like information about that, email me, holytrinitymemphis@yahoo.com. You can email them, but I'll be glad to link you to that book study if you'd like to be a part of that. And it's over Zoom, so they're encouraging all other churches to be involved in that. So it should be a really good conversation. Catherine, it's been a delight to have you here. Blessings on the work
thank
of the
you.
center, and thank you for joining us.
Well, you're so welcome, Paul, and thank you for inviting me. And it's delightful to have this opportunity to see you again. And maybe we'll have another reunion someday when we can all be back in buildings again.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
thank you all for joining us. And
Take care.
take care to everyone. Bye bye.